Boeing slipping into correction territory, still up for the year, but it's off more than 10% from its all-time high. Boeing, a huge leader for the Dow since the election of Donald Trump. Is this sell-off completely just Trump and trade and tariffs?
Yes, and because it has been such a high flyer. So Boeing is the proxy stock for the trade war fears. And, no better place to take out those anxieties than upon this stock because it has gone up so high. Now, there are fundamental reasons why this company could suffer dramatically in a trade war with China because they do so much business in China. However, it's a little bit more complicated than that because China needs Boeing. They can't make enough airplanes themselves. They barely make commercial aircraft. They're just getting into that business. And Airbus would have them over a barrel. Airbus can't make enough planes for them anyway. And plus, Boeing is setting up a big manufacturing facility in Shanghai. So you could argue that it's unwarranted until you look at the PE. It's a high flyer, again, pun intended.
A definite high flyer here. Industrials off about 1.2% right now, heading into the close. Materials and financials both off about 1.3%. Consumer staples, XLP, also in here, and a lot of talk about the consumer today because we've got a ton of retail names lower. Retail sales fell for the third straight month. Miles, JCPenney, I mean, it's off like some 7%. Yep. Macy's, Nordstrom, like a slew of names getting caught in here. And it kind of doesn't make sense. Why is retail not doing well if we have the labor market firing all cylinders?
Well, I think you have to go back in time and look at what retail sales were like in the fall and that huge rebound we saw after Hurricanes Harvey. What was the other hurricane called? I forget.
Irma,
yeah, Irma,
year?
Right. I remember Maria.
Remember,
Irma was the Florida
remember there was a
one.
couple in Florida named Harvey and Irma that they found?
Yes.
Right.
Remember that story?
Yeah. So go back in time, right? It's all about the comps here,
okay.
And I think that it was a funny reaction this morning to this report, which was again disappointing. But remember, we're coming off a very strong fall, and I think what happens when economic data doesn't seem to square is you have to realize that there's something off, and I think what's off here is the comparables in retail sales that we saw a couple of months ago, because with the labor market firing the way it is, consumers getting tax cuts, consumer confidence high, business confidence is high, it's clear that the retail sales report is not capturing something that's going on in the economy, or rather is simply subject to kind of its own flaws. All of these reports are ultimately flawed in some way, and I think this is showing up here. But yeah, I mean these are stocks that have been crushed for kind of many reasons over the last few years. JCPenney with $3.03 a share. I mean, these things at an all-time low.
And today, I mean, we gapped up, but then with the trade stuff and with retail, it just seemed to have the selling could not be stopped here. There were some stocks, so hitting 52-week highs, a bunch of sort of our old 2.0 tech names, Etsy.
And we just had the CEO of Etsy,
Yes.
Josh Silverman, in with a conversation with
Melody
Hong
Hong yesterday. Square, Twitter, CNBC reporting that Twitter's looking to take on Snap with a camera-first feature. So it wasn't everything down today.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously it's dependent, company dependent, and you look at JCPenney and ask yourself when the last time you went into a JCPenney was, and just to be fair, maybe you don't live near one, so when you heard of a relative going there, or a friend, or anybody, or anything positive happening about that company. So that's a pretty big swath of information you're not hearing at all about that company.
That was a short bell. There you go. For the New York Stock Exchange. No, Alan Cumming was there yesterday.
Right.
This is a live picture of the New York Stock Exchange, looking at a sell-off here on Wall Street. The Dow off more than the NASDAQ and the S&P, but still we're red across the board. Utilities, only sector really to talk about much to the upside, and it's up about 0.8%. And on the Dow, Boeing off more than 2%, DuPont off more than 2%, J&J and Goldman Sachs both off about 1.5%.
Tech hung in there today, though. We had Google in the green, Facebook in the green, Amazon in the green, and I think it's very interesting. You pulled up that Boeing chart before, and I think there's so many things going on now in the market where you have the Boeing defense story last year really boosting it, then you had the China story kind of impacting it now, but it's just a messy chart. I mean, that chart's just a complete mess. And to Andy's point earlier about it being a proxy or some kind of battleground for where the kind of global economy is at right now, I think it is a great example of we're not really sure. It's going to resolve one way or the other.
Keep that thing up there. Crimea River Boeing shareholders.
That
top right.
It's up 80%.
34% over the past 6 months. That's what I'm talking. Yeah, Pras, he put that back up so I could just be a little.
Yeah, Crimea River. I know. This is actually why Prost was poo-pooing my whole Boeing correction earlier today, because you're looking at this chart, it's just a 10% off of the high. This stock has performed incredibly well.
Yeah, if you bought it last week, I feel bad.
Basically any time period. Just take this year.
He's being a definition truther.
Yeah, a definition. President Trump actually right now is in St. Louis, and he is touring a Boeing facility. So one other tie between those two.
You know what's funny? You know who toured a Boeing facility before him, actually, though?
Who?
Recently? President Xi Jinping in the United
Well,
States.
it goes back to your point that they need him.